The wound is not your enemy. It is your teacher. And if you dare to sit with it, to listen to its cry, you will find that the very pain you've been running from contains the answer you've been searching for your whole life. Most people spend years trying to numb the ache within them, never realizing that the ache itself is the doorway. The wound is where the light enters, not as a poetic metaphor, but as a psychological reality. Stay with me until the end, and you will come to see that your chaos is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your transformation. The wound is not just a scar etched upon the soul, it is the symbol of a deeper process unfolding within. You see, we often assume that healing means to return to the version of ourselves that existed before the wound. But what if the purpose of the wound is not to bring us back, but to awaken us to something entirely new? What if the pain you carry is not merely something to escape from, but a sacred invitation to descend into the depths of your psyche, where the forgotten parts of you are still waiting to be seen? This descent is not glamorous. It's raw, disorienting, and often profoundly isolating. Because when the wound opens, it exposes everything you've tried to bury beneath the surface: your insecurities, your grief, your anger, your unmet needs. And yet, paradoxically, this is where the light begins to enter. Not in spite of your suffering, but because of it. You cannot find the gold without first touching the dirt. The path to wholeness is not a straight line upward. It spirals inward and downward first, into the chaos of the self, before it ever moves toward clarity. The world teaches you to cover up, to put on a mask, to present a curated version of yourself that fits into expectations. But the soul does not speak through masks. It speaks through cracks. It whispers through the tremble in your voice, the silent tears, the sleepless nights. And it is precisely in those moments, when your outer world has fallen apart, that the inner world begins to stir. The very chaos you resist becomes the ground from which a new consciousness begins to emerge. What we call wounds are often unintegrated truths. They are fragments of experience that could not be fully felt at the time of impact: traumas, betrayals, rejections that splintered off from the conscious mind and took refuge in the unconscious. But they do not remain silent. They return, in dreams, in emotional triggers, in cycles that repeat until we finally pay attention. And when you begin to listen, truly listen, you realize that the wound is not against you. It is for you. It is calling you home to parts of yourself that have been exiled. That is the secret most people miss. They try to fix the wound, numb it, solve it, but transformation does not come from fixing. It comes from facing, from allowing the wound to speak its truth without judgment, from making space within you for what you once rejected. And slowly, as you stay present with the discomfort, the wound begins to soften. Not because it disappears, but because you have changed your relationship to it. You are no longer a victim of it. You are becoming a witness, a student, a participant in your own healing. And in this witnessing, something extraordinary happens. You begin to encounter what the ancients called the shadow, the hidden, unconscious parts of yourself that you disowned to survive. The shadow is not evil. It is not your enemy. It is simply the part of you that was pushed aside when you learned that being fully yourself was not safe. Perhaps you were too sensitive, too intense, too curious, too expressive for the people around you. So you learned to dim your light, to suppress your instincts, to betray your own essence for the sake of belonging. But the soul never forgets who you are, and so the shadow waits, buried, dormant, but alive. It waits for the moment when you are strong enough to meet it without fear, and the wound becomes the threshold. It is through the wound that the shadow returns, not to destroy you, but to reintegrate into the whole of your being. When you stop running from your darkness, you realize that it contains the very power you were seeking. The strength to speak your truth, the intuition to make aligned choices, the courage to break free from roles that no longer serve you. This is not a one-time revelation. It is a process, a dialogue with the unconscious that unfolds over time. The more you engage with your shadow, the more you realize that within it lie hidden treasures. Your creativity, your instincts, your passion, your boundaries, all of these were entangled with the parts of you you learned to suppress. But they can be reclaimed. They can be brought back into the light of awareness, not as threats to your identity, but as essential ingredients of your wholeness. You begin to see that healing is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you were before the world told you who to be. And that means embracing not just your light, but your darkness. Not just your joy, but your grief. Not just your strength, but your vulnerability. Because in the totality of your experience, you become real. And in being real, you become free. But let us not romanticize the process. This work is demanding. It requires you to confront illusions, to question the beliefs you've built your life upon. It asks you to leave behind the familiar roles, the comfortable narratives, the convenient lies. It demands that you descend into your own inner underworld and face the dragons that guard your deepest truths. And it is in this descent that the true meaning of suffering is revealed, not as punishment, but as purification, not as failure, but as initiation. The psyche does not wound you to harm you. It wounds you to awaken you, because the life you've been living, the one built on avoidance and performance and survival, is too small for who you truly are. The wound comes to rupture that life, to shatter the illusion of control, to dismantle the ego's fortress. And in the rubble, a deeper self emerges. A self that is rooted not in appearances, but in essence. Not in certainty, but in presence. Not in control, but in surrender. When you begin to see pain as a language, when you understand that your suffering is the psyche's way of speaking to you, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to reveal?" And that shift changes everything. Because now, instead of resisting the experience, you begin to explore it. You begin to enter into relationship with it. And in that relationship, you discover meaning. Meaning does not arise from comfort. It is forged in the crucible of suffering. When you walk through the fire with open eyes and an open heart, you are transformed. Not into someone perfect, but into someone whole. Someone who knows that the wound is not the end, but the beginning of a deeper story. A story where the darkness becomes the canvas for light. Where the fracture becomes the opening through which grace enters. Where the very thing that once threatened to break you becomes the foundation upon which your strength is built. And so, the journey continues. With every step into the unknown, with every confrontation of the shadow, with every surrender to the wound, the psyche reveals more of its mystery. And you begin to realize that the chaos you feared was not chaos at all, but the disordered wisdom of a soul, rearranging itself toward truth. The clarity you seek will not come from outside. It will rise, slowly and steadily, from within. From the quiet moments when you dare to feel. From the silence that follows surrender. From the truth that waits in the center of the wound. It is in those moments that you understand what it means to be human, not a flawless being, but a becoming one. One who is not afraid of the dark. One who knows that the light is not the absence of darkness, but its transformation. One who walks not with certainty, but with trust in the process that is unfolding within. There is a moment, quiet yet seismic, when you realize that transformation does not wait for permission. It does not ask if you're ready, if the timing is convenient, if your life is neatly arranged. It arrives like a storm, not to destroy, but to reorder, and at the center of that storm stands the truthier truth. Not the one you've performed for others, not the one inherited from parents, or culture, or religion, but the raw, unfiltered essence of who you are beneath all masks. To arrive at that truth, you must become radically honest with yourself. You must be willing to dismantle the illusions you've clung to, the identities you've worn like armor, the distractions that once dulled the ache of meaninglessness. It is far easier to remain asleep, to blame others, to point to circumstances, to retreat into the comforting arms of avoidance. But somewhere deep within, the soul resists this escape. It knows that the lies you live by are costing you more than they're protecting. It knows that truth, though often painful, is the only ground stable enough to stand on. To be honest with oneself is not simply a moral virtue, is a spiritual necessity. It is the act of becoming congruent, of aligning your outer life with your inner knowing. And that alignment cannot happen without discomfort, because every lie you've built your life upon must first be seen for what it is. There is no greater labor than self-examination, to look in the mirror of your own psyche and acknowledge not only what is noble, but what is broken. To admit, without defensiveness, the roles you've played to feel important, the compromises you've made to feel loved, the betrayals you've committed against your own soul for the sake of approval. These recognitions sting, but they are not meant to shame. They are meant to liberate. For as long as you hide from these truths, they will control you from the shadows. But when you bring them into the light of awareness, they lose their power over you. Honesty is the beginning of freedom. It breaks the chain of denial. It makes space for something new to emerge. And once you begin to live from that place of truth, even if it's fragile, even if it's messy, you find that the world responds differently. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You are no longer negotiating your worth with others. You are no longer outsourcing your identity to systems and structures that were never built to support your authenticity. You are becoming real. And in that realness, A deep clarity begins to form, not as an answer shouted from the mountaintop, but as a whisper from within, a sense that you are, at last, walking your own path. Yet, that clarity does not arrive all at once. It must be forged. And it is forged through conscious suffering. The kind of suffering that comes not from fate alone, but from your willingness to feel fully, to enter into your experience without numbing, without escape, without denial. Suffering becomes transformational only when you choose to remain present within it. It is the conscious engagement with your pain that turns it from a torment into a teacher. And it is in that sacred engagement that your soul begins to reveal its wisdom. Pain is not the enemy, numbness is. For pain, when held consciously, contains within it the seeds of meaning. It breaks open the walls you've built. It humbles the ego. It carves new space within the psyche, space that is necessary for the birth of a deeper self. But for this alchemy to take place, you must stop asking life to spare you from discomfort. You must instead learn to walk with it, to dialogue with it, to trust that it is not here to break you, but to remake you. You cannot outrun your own evolution. At some point, every soul must decide whether to live asleep or awaken, whether to repeat inherited patterns or break through into authenticity. And the breaking through does not happen in sunlight. It happens in shadow. In those moments of inner rupture, when everything you believed about yourself crumbles under the weight of deeper truth. It happens when you are brought to your knees, not because you are weak, but because something inside you must die in order for something new to be born. This is the crucible of transformation, and it is sacred. You are not being punished. You are being refined. And though it feels like chaos, it is in fact a deeper order reasserting itself. One that does not prioritize success or stability, but wholeness. And wholeness includes everything: your failures, your griefs, your regrets, your fears. Nothing is left out. Nothing is wasted. All is gathered, all is used, all is integrated. And in this process of integration, you begin to see that what once felt like senseless suffering was, in truth, the very fire that made you real. Do not rush the process. Clarity does not come on demand. It arises like dawn, slowly, softly, illuminating what was once hidden. And it emerges only when you have earned it through presence, through patience, through the choice to remain awake even when it hurts. That is the path of the inner warrior, not to conquer the world, but to become whole within it. To suffer consciously is to participate in your own becoming. To refuse it is to remain fragmented, ruled by fears you dare not name. And when the light begins to emerge, it does not erase your darkness, it transforms it. You begin to see the wounds not as stains, but as sacred scars. You recognize that every moment of despair was preparing the ground for clarity. You realize that the pain you once thought would destroy you has, in fact, initiated you into your deepest wisdom. The chaos was never the enemy. It was the portal. And so you learn the art of alchemy, not in a laboratory, but in the heart. Not with chemicals, but with consciousness. Alchemy is the transformation of the soul, the turning of base material grief, loss, fear into the gold of insight and strength. It is the process of making light from darkness, meaning from pain, freedom from the very chains that once bound you. You begin to see that nothing in your life was wasted, not the heartbreaks, not the failures, not even the seasons of numbness. Every moment was part of the design, part of the slow shaping of your inner landscape. And in this realization, bitterness gives way to gratitude. You thank the wound, you thank the chaos, you thank the long, silent nights, because they brought you to yourself. Not the self others expected of you, but the true, undivided self you were always meant to become. This is not the end of suffering, but it is the beginning of understanding. And with understanding comes power, not the power to control, but the power to endure, to create, to shine. The alchemy of the soul is not about removing pain from life, but about changing your relationship to it. It is about becoming someone who can hold sorrow and still choose joy, who can sit with confusion and still trust the process, who can see the shadow and still walk toward the light. And the more you do this inner work, the more you radiate it outward. You become a presence in the world that speaks without words. Others see in your eyes that you have walked through fire. They sense in your silence that you have made peace with parts of yourself they are still running from. And that presence, that quiet, grounded, soulful presence is what begins to change the world, not through force, but through resonance, through the simple truth of a soul that has been made whole. This is the essence of self-transformation. It is not about becoming something new. It is about returning to what was always within you. The light was never outside. It was hidden in the wound, waiting, watching, whispering. And now, finally, it is being born.